Welcome to the African News Review podcast, where we cut through the noise and get to the truth. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and each week we are here to challenge the biases, prejudices, and misinformation in the Western press about Africa. Using historical context and contemporary insights, we set the record straight and reclaim the narrative. Tune in every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we uncover the real stories and reshape the conversations about Africa. This is the African News Review podcast, reclaiming Africa's narrative, one story at a time. Yes, greetings again, and welcome to African News Review, your regular weekly news update with regards to Africa in the Western press. And with me are two brilliant minds as usual. I will start with attorney, host, Rethinking Freedom, and co-host of Women and Resistance, Aya Fubera Eneli Esquire. Welcome, sister.
Thank you. Greetings to you. Good to be with both of you again today.
And he needs no further introduction, but we will introduce him all the same. He's journalist, broadcaster, WBAI, Blackstad News, Radio New York, author of Manufacturing Hate, Comrade Milton Alimadi.
I'm not sure he can hear you.
Can you hear us, comrade? Wow, said he can't hear.
Wow. He could hear us earlier.
I think I had a little bit of a technical problem, but now I can.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Go ahead, comrade.
Okay, no worries. We're just introducing you and welcoming you to the show, as usual.
Asante, thank you.
Okay, as has become custom, we'll take the news from where you ladies and gentlemen are. We're starting from the ladies. What's the news where you're at, sister?
Well, we continued still in our battle. The latest bill that has been signed, I believe, into law is that they have prohibited the use of the Plan B abortion pill. So in Texas, it is now illegal to use that. So women and even men, you've had unprotected sex, you're not ready to have that, to have a baby even be conceived. That was something you could take to preempt conception and all of that. That has been stripped away from women. And so again, for women and for men who care, is this generation. In my time, we are passing on to our daughters fewer rights than they had when I was a little girl, and that is not a good thing. And what I always say to the pro-abortion, I should say the anti-abortion people, because they're not pro-life. They like to use terminology that is inaccurate. If they were pro-life, they will be pro-healthcare. They will be anti-death penalty. They're not. So they're not pro-life. They're anti-quote-unquote abortion. Is that I have not seen any bills that pertain to curtailing men's reproductive rights. I have not seen any bills that police men's bodies in any way. These are all bills that police women's bodies. And we know that when women do not have the right to choose when they reproduce, how they reproduce, that affects every other aspect of their lives. It affects earning potential. It affects getting educated. It affects how you're able to work when you're able to work, because we're also not providing any assistance to women, really. When they get pregnant, we don't want to help them with daycare or child care or expenses, any of that. And so the goal, according to Project 2025, is to take women back to the 1800s, where you were barefoot and pregnant and under the complete control of men. And women, I don't know why we are still silent, because you may think this does not affect you, but
until it does affect
all
you.
of us.
Thank you. Brother Milton, what's the news where you're at?
Well, I'd like to say something about that. I mean, I would be curious to know what is the position European American women.
We hear you well.
Oh, you can't hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, what is the position of white women compared to Black women on that issue? Because white women played a key role in electing this president. So I would really like to know. It's amazing that while it's always Africa that is depicted as the most backward when it comes to women's rights, we have one of the most industrialized countries in the world, actually aggressively pushing women backward. And ironically, a large proportion of European American women playing a role in that as well. That's very ironic to me. In terms of my own observation, Chicago is building up to be a very interesting location. As you know, Chicago is saying, no way, we are not going to tolerate the deployment of, the National Guards. So it seems like a confrontation is going to be brewing in Chicago. In Chicago, it seems that people are very organized. I was looking at a news item yesterday where ICE agents had attempted to go into a certain location to get some people, and that people resisted and that they had to back out. So I'm telling people, let's keep an eye on Chicago, how things are going to evolve.
Okay.
Yeah, there's an image that came out of Chicago where they lined up all their ICE trucks, not ICE as in the terrorists that have been deployed by the federal government, but the trucks that they use in de-icing the roads, the salt trucks and all of that, where they've lined them up as a barrier to prevent ICE and whatever military trucks and vehicles that Trump may be trying to deploy. They're going to have to bash through that, which would make for some very interesting optics. So I would say that the Civil War has started in the United States, whether we realize it or not.
Well, the news from where we're at is that, it calls into question the role of the United States as well. Nigel Farage, who happened to be the head of the Reform Party, was in Congress, apparently to scream and shout that freedom of speech is being curtailed in Britain, in the United States. Let that make sense. But then two questions were posed to him. You screamed and shout that you scream and shout that the freedom of speech is being curtailed in the UK, yet you will not allow journalists into your conferences, your party conferences. Make that make sense. And then one other question that was posed to him was one of, you say freedom of speech. So freedom of speech extends to the point where you can incite people to go and burn refugees, hotels hosting refugees. Does that, and then basically ran back to the UK with his tail between his legs. So that is the news from where we're at. So that said, we go to, for our first story today, we go to Radio France International. And it reads that France would return skulls to Madagascar 127 years after Colonial massacre. France on Tuesday returned 3 skulls to Madagascar, including one believed to be a king who was beheaded by French troops following a massacre in August 1897. And it goes on. These skulls entered the national collections in circumstances that clearly violated human dignity and in context of colonial violence, said French Culture Minister Rachida Dati at a ceremony to send the relics home. Her Madagascan counterpart, Volodymyr Donamara, described the return of the skulls as an immensely significant gesture. Their absence has been for more than a century an open wound in the heart of an island, Mara said. What are your initial thoughts? Let's go. Yes, we can hear you. Yeah, in Zimbabwe. Yeah, Ethiopian prints, relics. Yeah, sister?
I'm actually trembling as we attempt to read this article. I'm going to just take a second and just pour libation for our ancestors. Let's try and even this will be me being very measured. Let's try and rewrite that article. How about the heading be A Century of Desecration? France's return of Madagascar's stolen ancestors. What France calls a return is in truth an admission of one of the gravest sacrileges of colonialism. And as Brother Milton just mentioned, it's not an isolated incident. So when we talk about a dark continent, when we talk about who's backward and primitive and barbarian, it's an absolute projection on us, what they did to us, and continue to do, by the way. In August 1897, French troops committed a massacre in Dembi, Western Madagascar. King Toera of the Sakalava had surrendered. He was unarmed when he and hundreds of his people were butchered. His head was severed. They dismembered his head. They cut off his head. Okay? His dignity stolen, his ancestors and descendants dishonored, and the head of this king, the spiritual and political heart of a body, was carried away by the French colonizers, these barbarians, like a trophy. They didn't stop at that. They proceeded to display the thing. It's a thing. Even though, yes, we can go and dissect what the word relic means, but it's a thing to them. It's an artifact. They displayed it and made, I don't know how many francs they made from people paying money to come and view this. Think about it. You take a human, you kill them when they shouldn't have been. This was a surrender. You cut their heads off, and then you actually carry the heads over the ocean to your place, do whatever it is that you did, and then display. Traditions teach us that the body is sacred, the vessel through which the soul journeys and through which descendants remain bound to the living dead. To cut off the head of a sovereign, to cut off the head of any human being, to display it in a foreign museum, to strip a people of their ancestors' wholeness is an abomination. I'm not clapping for them. Yes, we are glad that we have started the process of returning what belongs to us. But this was a deliberate attempt to sever memory, to humiliate, and to dominate. And it took 127 years for King Toera and others to languish in Paris as curiosities, trapped in drawers, robbed of ritual, robbed of rest. It was not preservation, it was spiritual captivity. And every year it stayed with them, it was a renewed insult, mocking our dignity and trampling on the laws of our ancestors. And now they return the skulls. Like you're talking about no humans involved.
Yeah.
The remains of our kings and our kin and our queens, all of us, should never have been touched, let alone displayed. This theft was a crime against humanity. The captivity was a crime. Their delayed return is yet another crime. The fact that you've made money off of this is yet another crime. This is just beginning. And so when the Madagascar Minister of Culture says their absence is an open wound, she speaks the truth. And that is a wound that has bled for generations. All of us desire to have the bodies of our loved ones available for us to do our sacred duty of burying them, to perform rites, to reconcile the living and the ancestors. And there will be no peace on this earth till these folk do right by us. But it is also our responsibility to demand that this return. So I'm so furious at what these people do, what they've done, how they continue to mask it, and then they use this language. So if you put back on the screen what that article said, they act like it was some aliens from somewhere. It just kind of happened. Please, if you don't mind putting that article back. Listen to this. People understand what they're doing with language. The skulls entered the national collections. What are we talking about? The skulls got up and were like, oh, we're going to swim across the ocean and we're just going to walk into the national collection. And then you just say in circumstances. What were the circumstances? And how are you continuing those circumstances today, even as we watch a flotilla of boats attempting to access Gaza to provide basic needs for people that we are watching, although the media is trying to camouflage it, the establishment media, as we watch children, women, men, people die when there is so much food that America is incinerating food rather than allow people to consume it. Man, I'm so
you're about to unleash.
Yeah, carry on.
Brother Milton, you wanted to say later to a standstill. Yeah. I would just like to add, the good sister has, enumerated so many aspects of it, but there is a couple of lines in that article there. Entered their collection, a collection of relics. Yeah, a collection of relics. So, yeah.
Do they have the heads of their kings and their leaders and rulers displayed in this national collection?
So France has, Brother Milton said he's not aware of France's panache when it comes to this level of barbarism. Okay. Yeah. You just need to look at Algeria's War of Independence. If you Google the Algeria War of Independence and look at French treatment of Algerians, you will see them literally posing with severed heads. So it's okay. So it's part of the colonial. It's part of the colonial project. Because like the good sister said, there are no humans involved. You are not human to them. And so they're free to do as they will, keeping the severed head of a monarch for a century and a generation plus. And then you return it, hoping to get some sort of kudos. I don't know what you're going to get out of it. And the British, you can't even excuse the British. The British even went as far as digging up the dead that has been buried. Yeah. When the Mahdi defeated General Gordon in Sudan, part of the British coming back to revenge his death, he had already been dead 4 years prior to the British coming back. And when they were told that he was dead, they actually went to his gravesite, dug him up, and took the skull back to the wife of General Gordon, who said she wanted nothing to do with it. So the question is, where is that skull at the moment? So that is the conversation. Yes. Yeah. And then making demands.
And I believe that
championed, organization.
I believe historians and teachers across African nations need to take it upon themselves to start teaching this in the schools. Because I know that growing up in Nigeria, the prevailing idea where white people come to save us, they come to give us better opportunities, they are good. And so whenever they show up, we lay out the red carpet for them, not understanding that we are essentially inviting our oppressors in to continue with their oppression and not holding them accountable for the things that they've done. And that's because we're ignorant about our history.
Okay, which gives us the perfect segue for the next story, which is European worship, but this time with a stinge of xenophobia. We go to The Guardian, and it reads, Attempt to partner African countries with Japanese cities triggers xenophobic backlash. Cities in Japan have received thousands of complaints amid confusion over scheme that was intended to foster closer ties. The lead reads, an attempt to promote friendship between Japan and countries in Africa has transformed into a xenophobic row about migration after inaccurate media reports suggested that the scheme would lead to a flood of immigrants. The controversy erupted after Japan's International Cooperation Agency, or JICA, said this month that he has designated 4 Japanese cities as Africans' hometowns for partner countries in Africa: Mozambique, Nigeria, Ghana, and Tanzania. What do you make of this story? Go on. It sounds...
So I actually burst out laughing when I read this article. It's okay for the West and, Chinese, Japanese, for them to sail across the world and to impose their will in other places. That's fine. They consider themselves superior, particularly to the Africans. Not so funny when they sense that the Africans may have some kind of, what would I say, upper hand in a sense. So xenophobia, we know, is the fear, dislike, or hostility towards people perceived as foreign or outsiders. But here's the deal that Japan and increasingly the West have to deal with. In Japan, they have an aging population. A third of their population is 65 years or older. In Japan, they have labor shortages. Industries like elder care, construction, and agriculture are facing major workforce gaps. They simply need human beings to be able to keep their economies going. Now, like us or not like us, what are you gonna do about your economy? So, talking about these partnerships, there have been for a long time agreements between different cities in the West and in quote unquote Africa and other places of the world, actually, where they have what they call sister cities. And it's supposed to be a cultural exchange. It's an acknowledgement that the world is getting smaller and that we're all kind of connected. People who don't want to embrace that, I don't know. Like the world, these lines that have been arbitrarily drawn don't mean anything to Mother Nature and don't mean anything in terms of the realities of policies that you've made that have impacted and choices people have made individually that have impacted their population growth. So I'm not surprised that there are people who don't want Africans around. Dark-skinned people, based on the notion of white supremacy, have been vilified all over the world, every part of the world. Shoot, Africans are vilifying themselves based on our features. But the bottom line is Japan's total fertility rate is about 1.2 children per woman. It's among the lowest in the world. They had fewer than 800,000 babies born in 2022, which was the lowest since records began. Their deaths now outnumber births by more than double annually. And so they may not like us, but they actually need us.
Okay, Brother Milton, yeah, that's the case that racism is. I mean,
you know what? It is very special. I suppose they should have thought about that. Naomi Osaka, who I think lost in the quarterfinals maybe of the U.S. Open, she's Haitian and Japanese, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, she is Japanese and Haitian. Japanese and Asian.
She had American citizenship as well, but she gave up her American citizenship to
represent Japan.
And some of them don't necessarily appreciate the fact that she identifies as a Black woman, although they'll take her wins under the Japanese column. So, these guys.
Okay. Speaking to that, actually, there is an episode going on. Why should I even? There's a very racist event going on in Congo. Chinese engineers that had miners and engineers that worked in the Congos in the early 50s, 60s, 70s had procreated with Congolese women.
Yes.
And for some reason, there is a quite sizable population of Congolese Japanese, which is quite an odd mix. But that number would have been increased, but for the fact that one doctor actually euthanized the babies. But the ones that survived have been, shall I say, just disregarded. Just taking a quick break here on the African News Review podcast, but don't go anywhere. If you're enjoying our deep dive into the real stories behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern, we're here to debunk the myths and bring you the truth about Africa. Want to help spread the word? Share this podcast with your friends and leave us a review. It goes a long way in helping others discover the real Africa. Without further ado, let's get back to setting the record straight.
Yes. And Japan won't allow them to claim citizenship through their fathers.
Yes. So when this headline comes out and says the bit of xenophobia, no, it is racist. It is racist, and we should call it for what it is, which is why this program exists to, reframe the narrative. You cannot write stuff like that and play to our faces that it's just benign xenophobia. No. These societies have deep-rooted cultures that is adverse to foreign influence. And then when the Western press comes and colors in the margin saying, oh, but it's not like that. And we read it.
So how then would you respond to, I'm not disagreeing with you, there may be more than two narratives at play. Yeah. Because how then do you respond to the xenophobia in South Africa against other Africans, particularly Nigerians?
Well, that is
They're all black.
Of course, I'll put that down to what Brother Milton said, European worship. Don't forget that these people were locked behind a wall for 78, 80 years, not knowing anything outside of who they are or how they've been described. Second grade education, the inability to travel and see people outside of the place. If all you see is the benevolence of the Boers and you think that's the best you can attain to, anybody else that comes and tells you otherwise will be considered an enemy. Yeah, Brother Milton, you wanted to say something. Oh, sorry. I was trying to I was trying to filter the background. Yeah. Mentor. Yeah. The election. Yeah. Sister, you wanted to say something?
No.
Okay. Speaking of position, what's the position when it comes to literacy in Africa? For our next article, we go to the AP, the Associated Press, and the headline reads, a Nigerian group attempts a 431-hour reading marathon to set a Guinness World Record. Commendable. Abuja, Nigeria, AP. It's a bookworm's idea of heaven. 18 days of non-stop reading in a restaurant in Nigeria, Lagos. 3 men and 2 women have been reading books for over 431 hours in an attempt to set a Guinness World Record for the longest marathon reading and part of a campaign to promote literacy in Africa's populous country. It goes on. By Saturday, when the attempt ended, the reading marathoners have read 79 books authored by Nigerians. In the country, more than 210 million people, most people haven't have access to books and participated to encourage active education. So let me go to Sister first because she does a bit of reading.
First of all, I absolutely commend these young people, and they're all young, well, relative to me, the 30 and under, for this very bold initiative. And oh my goodness, 131 hours. I had to go and do the math. And I'm like, okay, were they taking turns? Were they sleeping in between? Did they go and take a shower? Wait a second. Did the electricity stay on for the whole time in Nigeria for them to read that long? But I'm so glad that they're using this as a means to draw attention to the issues of access to books and the issue of literacy in Nigeria. As you know, and maybe some of your viewers know or don't know, in 2022, yes, I, with the financial support of a few people, we were able to open the first public library in Opobo town. It's a small town in the southern eastern part of Nigeria, a town with over 3,000 young people who permanently live there. There are many others who, come back just during the holidays, but who had no library. And so even if you had a child who was curious, even if you had a young adult, if you had an older person who wanted to read, there were no bookstores, and, you could buy the little books for your school, poverty and access and all of that. And so we were able to open this library that is open 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And we encountered a lot of opposition, the idea of opening this library. We're still not at the level that we want to be, just because we really do not yet have the support of the powers that be. And I have to be careful how I say that so that we can get more support. But we decided to start where we could. It's just a 2-room library. And the response from the young people has been amazing. We're averaging close to 70 kids every single day. They're attending reading circles. things of that nature. And what we've done, which I appreciate that the individuals that initiated and participated in this reading marathon did as well, is that we have primarily centered books that are for us and about us. So yes, they're not all written by Nigerians, but the vast majority of books in that library are written about Africans by Africans. Now, we understand that we are in a world, it's a whole globe, and so we do have a few other authors and definitely with the science textbooks and so on and so forth, but we wanted these young people, particularly for our younger ages, we wanted them to see images that looked like them
on the page,
and not the same whitewashing that I got as a child, where 99% of the books that I read were written by white people, were written for white people, and had white images in there. Enid Blyton was one of them, Famous Five, Secret Seven. And I devoured those books, and in the process was also devouring a worldview that said I had not, and my people had not in any way contributed to civilization at all, which makes you, without realizing it, subconsciously question your own worth, your own level of intelligence. So I'm very glad that they put on this reading marathon. I'm grateful for the publicity that they're getting. I hope that they're getting the same, if not more, publicity in Nigeria as well. And I hope that this encourages more of us to create opportunities for literacy, for young people to access books wherever we may be. Because even here in the United States, although we have libraries, increasingly they are cemeteries. There are very few people who are accessing it, and fewer and fewer children of color accessing libraries, especially with all these devices in our hands. And yet reading, as we used to say, is absolutely fundamental. It rewires your brain in a certain way. It sharpens your ability to think, to process. And a thinking people are not so easily
controlled,
manipulated, and oppressed.
Yes. Percent. Yeah, for the education. I give kudos to them, because when I saw the story, I was like, wow, okay. First things, they're beating a record. So the record used to be verified. It will be verified in a couple of weeks. 43 odd number equals to 18 days straight reading. 2 was the fact that they were reading just Nigerian authors. Again, commendable. I mean, they could expand it to African authors, but that would be me, But again, because you can't have access to the books, you got to work with what you have. Okay. Yeah. Then 3 was the fact that it was both genders. It was male and female.
Yeah.
That to me sent a powerful message that reading is not just unique to one gender. You can have various interests, but, reading is what brings you together. So the final point I want to make on it is, it's a shame that in Nigeria itself, it doesn't have a national library, which is a sad indictment on the country. Nigeria does not have a national library. It's yet to be completed, which is shocking. I mean, if you go into Abuja, is the grand opulence, everything is on show. But to not have a place where your mind can be sharpened is mind-boggling. But, hopefully somebody is listening to this and takes it upon themselves. I won't hold... Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, brother. To take her down.
You're a lost cause. Yeah. Yeah, sister. Yeah.
No, that story was so funny that I've actually forgotten what it is that I wanted to say. But keep hope alive. Jesse Jackson was saying,
you were out of your league.
Keep hope alive. But you know what? And thank God her parents allowed her to go to school, because so many people have been denied opportunities just along those gender lines. I would say that when you talked about the lack of a national library in Nigeria, I remember going back to visit my father, who was a college professor, after my freshman year at Ohio State University. I was still studying, so I went with a friend of mine who was a student at that university to their library. So they did have a building, and they had a place called a library to study. And I was astonished that even back then, as a sophomore in high school, so I was transitioning from my freshman year to my sophomore year, I personally had more books than what was displayed in the university library. I personally owned more books. And of course, then the books that they even had there, like no student was going to be, now today I would go and collect all those books. But those, they were like really old books, like really from the colonial era books, like a new book had not been purchased since whenever. So again, how do we expect to sharpen our minds, to understand our history, to know what we've done, to plan for our future, to rewrite the wrong narratives if we're not even holding up a culture of literacy? And so, but again, I'm not putting it on the government, because one of the criticisms I heard was, why you as an individual trying to do this? This is what the government should be doing. And I'm like, who is the government? You guys, we spend oodles of money on parties and all kinds of things that, yes, are great. We need to still live and enjoy life, but don't have as much lasting impact. I choose to deprive myself in other ways to provide books for kids to read, for whatever, good that does down the line. But that's what I choose to do. And I hope more individuals will start to see that we have a role to play in what happens in society, and not just to, clasp our hands in our laps and say it's not my responsibility.
When I was reading the story, I mentioned to my brother, I said, does he remember going? I grew up in Lagos. So on the streets of Lagos, you will find booksellers, literally books. And I mean up-to-date books that you could read, sharpen your mind. And the library was still working to a certain degree. Now, if you ask me what that library is, there are two libraries in Lagos, one in Onike-Yaba and the other one on Broad Street, Lagos. The one Broad Street, Lagos happens to be opposite a bookshop. That one has been closed down, is now a DNA center. The one in Onike-Yaba is now a mall that sells clothes.
There you have it.
So that's the society telling you what its priorities are, not your mind. The late ancestor, the late elder ancestor Ngugi wa Thiong'o will be asking the question, how do you decolonize your mind if you don't even have the tools to do it? So that's why you would have stories like the first one we had, 127 rail scores being returned, where that becomes like a big headline because people are not even aware of the kind of atrocities that happened in colonial Africa, because there are no books to chronicle that history for people to know. And where the information is available, like you said, sister, the libraries are ghost towns. Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
God, racist.
How racist.
Tintin Snow.
Or do you guys remember Curious George?
Yeah, Curious George. Yes.
And if you go back, and the father actually wore the colonial hat and outfit and everything. You go back and read those things today, and you're like, my God, this is what I was taking into my spirit.
Yeah, you mentioned Tintin. Don't forget the dog, Snowy. God.
And yet our colonizers recognize how to use literacy, the books, those of us who are literate, how to use that to control our minds. We need to be smarter.
You talk about literacy. Even compulsory reading in schools, William Shakespeare describes your Black people as less than. Think of Caliban. Caliban doesn't do anything other than grunt, So again, you have to ask the question, all of this literature that we've sort of, imbibed, what does it do to our psyche, without critical thinking? Because you're just reading, you're reading to pass exam, but some of us were reading for brilliance. It's like, I could quote Shakespeare, 12th Night, Merchant of Venice.
Can I tell what might seem like a very innocuous story? So again, if you were in any way colonized by the British, or you grew up with a lot of British literature, you would know Mills and Boon, and Harlequin romance.
Yeah.
And my mother forbade us from reading it, which meant I absolutely had to read it.
Yeah.
Okay. So once I went off to boarding school, I would try to get as many Mills and Boon copies as I could. And I could read 2 a night, just devouring these little 100 and some page books.
110.
And in all of them, the woman who is the object of the man's desire, there's always some, dark, tall, handsome, blue eyes, smoldering, whatever. The woman would always be described in a certain way, and her hair was a certain way, and her hands were a certain way. So I didn't even realize until my wedding day, decades later, that I did not see my hands as feminine and as beautiful enough. Because I had for so long imbibed this idea of long, delicate fingers and white, and, I don't want to be white, but they're just different ways that these things seep into your psyche.
Yeah.
I went to get my nails done, and one of my mentors said to me, one day you will learn to love your hands and see how amazing they are as they are. But it took me a moment to get there. But these are, so they're just things that just seep into how we see and feel about ourselves. They can absolutely cripple you, and you're not even aware of it, just based on what you're reading. So kudos to them for addressing literacy reading, for highlighting Nigerian authors. I hope that these are not Nigerian authors who have been whitewashed in their mindsets, and that these were actually revolutionaries and Pan-Africanists that they were reading. And next time, I will not mind joining them via Zoom, if you will.
Same here.
And let's bring Aiko Ama, let's bring Amy Cesar, let's bring Frantz Fanon, let's bring Tia Mechata, let's bring Flora Mwapa, let's bring some of these other people to the table as well.
Yeah. And let's bring Milton Alimadi's Manufacturing Hits.
Oh, and let's bring your book as well. Let's bring my book. Absolutely.
That's it. Final story. Final story comes from Al Jazeera, and it reads, Belgium asks US not to destroy millions in contraceptives bound for Africa. The Trump administration confirmed its plans to destroy the already purchased supplies, preventing their distribution. That's the place is being stored at the moment. And it goes on, the administration of United States President is being asked to abandon a plan to destroy a massive stockpile of contraceptives for women as part of his rollback on foreign aid. In an interview on Friday, the Belgian Foreign Minister Maxime Perron said the stockpile was mostly bound for sub-Saharan Africa. The Trump administration confirmed last month a plan to destroy the supplies, which are unexpired and have been purchased by the U.S. Agency for International Development, otherwise known as USAID, under former President Joe Biden. So, your take. What are we looking at here?
I would say kudos to Trump and his MAGA folk. They're being consistent.
Okay.
They don't want people in America to have access to contraceptives, but Americans pay attention because it's not just anti-abortion. They're coming for all the contraception. So I think they're being consistent. I think it's interesting because I wonder what this article would have looked like if they had gone and asked Bill Gates for his response on it. Because Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation have been working very, very hard to curtail women's reproductive rights across the continent. In fact, the Bill Gates Foundation rolled out a long-acting hormonal IUD effective for up to 8 years that they want to roll out in Kenya, not here, but in Kenya, with plans to expand to Nigeria and possibly other regions. The initiative tackles major barriers like cost and accessibility and is part of a broader $2.5 billion commitment they claim towards women's innovation. So it's interesting to me that Trump and Doji, whatever they were about not wasting taxpayers' money, reducing waste, but they've now incinerated billions of dollars of food that had already been paid for. They are now also going to apparently allow these contraceptives to be incinerated if they can find a country that will sign off on incinerating it, because this also has environmental impact as well. But the same time that they hate us so much and they don't want Africans migrating, and Japan is displaying its xenophobia and all of that, this is actually going to make sure that more babies are born across Africa. Although, let me also say this, I am very concerned about health access for women in Africa and also our ability to choose when and how we want to reproduce. But perhaps for African women, we might go back to what our ancestors used to do, because white people did not invent contraception. And we had cultural norms, and we also had herbs that we used to use to also control when and how we reproduce. We're not rabbits. So let's see how this plays out. But I feel like from this article, Trump is
being consistent.
He thinks he's spiting Africans. They want to do whatever they can not to give any quote unquote aid to Africa. And they would rather literally burn up dollars of money than to have it positively impact us, and let him go with God.
Beholden. With some of the most vital, some of the most fertile soils. Yeah. I mean, just to add, what I find reprehensible is the fact that now you're going to ask the European Union to incinerate stuff that can still be used, which is in clear violation of their own rules as well. I wait to see what the Europeans will do with regards to that request, because if they refuse to burn it, what is America going to do? Are they going to request for it to be returned to the United States, for it to be burned in the United States? Now think of the cost of just moving that stuff just to come and burn it. Doesn't make sense. African country. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, some semblance of normalcy is what we welcome with regards to their government. That said, any final thoughts, sister?
As I always say, thank you for drawing attention to these issues. Thank you for the opportunity to be in conversation with Comrade Milton, because I always learn so much from you. For those who don't know this man, he's truly a legend and someone who is still actively learning, teaching, fighting the fight. And I don't know how many people know your background in terms of the sacrifice that you have made for your views, the courage that you have had of your convictions. And so I'm very, very much inspired by you. And again, the power belongs to us if we choose to seize it. And I hope that as we listen to these stories, that we're thinking through not just the stories themselves, but how it applies to where we are and what we individually can start to do. And then what organizations we can join so that we can be more effective.
Yep, Brother Milton, Victory Azeta. Yes, do join the good sister and myself on Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern, for Women and Resistance. And this time we're looking at the life and times of Assata Shakur. So it promises to be a very special episode, like all the others are special. But also don't forget to like, share, subscribe. The autobiography of Assata Shakur, yes. Malcolm X, yeah.
How did you read it? Share that if you don't mind sharing. Yeah, the exact same. So I read the book a number of years ago, and then I was rereading it, but I also decided to also download it on Audible. And yesterday I went for a hike, and I decided that I wanted to listen to the book as I was hiking. And I'm telling you, it was like a spiritual experience, because I've heard her voice on her interviews, and the person who's reading the book actually sounds similar to her, similar cadence in some ways. And then it started pouring. I'm talking like major torrential downpour. And I'm walking in this thing with Assata in my ears, and how precise she is with her words in dissecting what this society is that we live in the United States. COINTELPRO, how they went after them, how they are still terrorizing Black people. And to realize she wrote this how many years ago, and it applies word for word today.
Yep.
It was just an incredibly powerful experience. I mean, I was completely drenched, but I was like, it's me and this downpour and Assata. She's a truly powerful woman, and she continues to fight where she is. Yeah, tune in to hear more, but my goodness, get her book. Get her book, because it also supports her too financially. Get the book.
It's called The Autobiography of Assata Shakur. It's just called, you will see Assata with that famous look. I love that look. Anyway, yes, do join us next week at the same time. Until then, it's good night and God bless. That's a wrap for this week on the African News Review podcast. We hope you are leaving with a clearer, more truthful picture of Africa. Remember, every story has another side, and we're here to uncover it. Don't forget to join us next Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we continue to challenge the narratives and reclaim Africa's voice. If you've enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep seeing Africa for what it truly is.